Here we are back at St Twinels, and this time I'm in Surveyor rather than in Driver to show off my latest model. And I need a lot of room for this one because it's not a railway related item, it's a scenery item and it's a big one. And so here we go, there it is, and that is an airship hangar. It's modelled on the two at Cardington, and actually the ground is a little bit bumpy there, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the height at the front here, 1995, and I'm just going to level up the ground like any good builder, just to make sure, because the interior floor should show through without any problem. So I'm just making sure, there we are, it's all at the same height, and that's what you should be looking at when you load this into Trainz. And I'm using my St Twinels route just as a demonstration for this. So the airship hangar is a scenery item, and it will accept, it's big enough to accept the two airships that I have on my website, which you can download. That's the R100, the British airship, and the Graf Zeppelin, German airship. And the whole period is the sort of 1920s, 1930s, although if you want to, you could just about stretch this back to the, well, about the middle of the First World War, mid 1910s. And it's really the sort of final item of the little group of airship items, or maybe the final item. There's possibility of some other things as well, which I'm modelling. And the first thing I want to do, let's just close that up, is I just want to rotate it a little bit. There we are, and that's so that the approach path is not crossing the tracks, which would be much more typical. And sorry, I've just got to go back there and smooth out the ground. The ground is well, less than even at St Twinels at the moment, and it's not going to be a flat pancake wherever I do it. So how are we going to use it? Well, we're going to use it with invisible track, and I've got my own invisible track here, and it's just simply a red line, which is only visible in Surveyor. And the ground level here we know is 19, what did it say there? 19.63 meters. And so that if we look at the spline height, the vertex height of the spline, we've got 19.89. So let's, well, it says 20 there, so let's call it 20, and we'll add 24 to it to make it 44. And that's because wherever you put this hanger, the center line, the track, needs to be 24 meters up from whatever height the ground is which you're using. So just do that, and if I swing around a little bit, you'll see, just about make out that red line there, you can see the red line. And the other thing, so that's going to go into the hanger, and we want, so I was just saying, an invisible buffer, there it is. So that's not mine, that just comes with Trainz. So now we're going to put an invisible buffer hopefully. Let's try again. There we are, an invisible buffer on the end, because this isn't animated. The airship hangar isn't animated. I should point out, by the way, that Trainz tends to mist the image and slants it across, so you can, if you want to adjust that from the default, so that so that it doesn't swing the view over, that's something you can do. So let's just Control Shift move around. What I want to do is to get the spline point here, right at the end and just about in the middle, I think I'm there, of the hangar. Here we are. So now if we drop down, you can see down the middle of the hangar we've got this invisible track, and that's where we're going to park our airship. And so the next step is to add some more track. I'm just going to add it on a nice sweeping path, and you're going to need a lot of it. These are big airships, and run out of sort of nice smooth space, so I'll take it up to there. And I'll have to put a spline point in there to raise it. But the height of that spline point there is what we want to use for the approach to the hangar. So 44. There we are. I'll just take it like that. And then what do we have over here? Here it is. 40. So we'll make that 64. There we are. And so that should give us a reasonable height. Just make sure that that isn't too low down, and it looks a bit low down at the moment. So let's just check the gradient, and we'll make the gradient 10. I think that'll help, and apply that to the height. Let's just raise that up. Maybe the thing that I should do is just use that 64 there as well, and there we are. We can just about see that red line. So that's going to be the approach line for our airship, and we'll want to put in another, maybe higher line shortly. I'll come back to that in a moment, but let's just put the first airship on, which will be R100. And so let's have a look up here, and we want SFR100, and just add that in. I think it just takes a bit of positioning. There it is, and turn it round, and it's going to come in over the estuary there and then slowly move towards the airship hangar. So that's, and you'll see there from this positioning surveyor that the airship is using that red line as a center line, allowing for the gradient, and that's its mooring point right at the front there. Now let's add a second track, and this one I'll leave it at 64, but we'll just start it off like this and let it come in at an angle. Now I would advise from experience having one track per airship, and to set them going as if they're, you know, independent. I think we'll bring this one in at 100 meters up. So it's coming in to stop, but it's going to be 100 meters up to start with. Bring it in high. There we go. So a nice big bit of height. And what I find is the great thing about these airships is just to have them droning away around the layout. And I'm just going to find this other one. Now this is a buffer, but it is actually a mooring mast. It acts as a buffer. There we are, and we're going to raise that up quite a bit. So let's have a look at the height. Let's put that in at 100. Ooh, way too high. So can't have it floating in the air, but it really depends on the ground height that you've got, and some of this ground is raised quite a bit. That's a bit too much down in the ground, so let's just see if we can lift that up a bit, and I think it would go a bit more. You can always tell by the spiral staircase. It just takes a little bit of fiddling to get it right, and then once you've done that, you're in. Still a bit high, so we take it down to a couple of meters. There we are. And oops, let's have a look at that. How does that look? Like, I think we're still floating, aren't we? Sorry about this. Just takes a little bit of sorting out, but it is worth all the hassle. So we take it down to 81 and just live with that, whatever it is, whatever it looks like. Yeah, they're slightly buried in the ground, and you can see here that the invisible track is way down here. So let's sort that out. So if that's 81, let's put that at 81. You want it to be horizontal. That would be the normal approach height for an airship. There we are. And we'll put another airship on this track, and it will be the other one that I've made. It's going to be the Graf Zeppelin. There it is. And like the R100, it uses the center line of the invisible track. So we've got two airships now. And my advice would be to make a big loop right around your route and set these just to run and let them run and run. And maybe if you want them to dock, you know, you can put that into the, when you're setting out their route. Okay, so those are the airship components which are available on my website. That's the two airships themselves, the mooring mast, which is actually a buffer, and now the hangar. So let's go into driver. And we'll just lose the overlays and we'll go to free roaming. And this is you'll remember, this is St Twinall's loco shed, and here's that hangar. And if you're standing on the platform at St Twinall's, for example, if you're lucky enough to do that, and you looked across, my goodness, that is some view. And these are enormous, both the hangar and the airships. but they existed and they were part of the scene. And for that period that I like modelling, from say 1900 to about 1935, or 1890 to about 1935, for me they're really part of the whole environment. So there we are, click on that. So I've got control of it, but free roaming. And let's get R100 parked in the hangar. So at the moment she's just doing 0, she's just hanging there, and of course they can just hang there without any difficulty. And by giving her a bit of acceleration, as you can see down here, the propellers are starting to turn and she's beginning to pick up a bit of speed. That's 4 miles an hour, 5, and if we move in a little bit closer, you should be hearing now the rotors going, 10 mile an hour, and here she is heading towards the hangar to be berthed in the hangar. Now you can't accelerate R100 very fast. It's deliberately set so that it can't be, you can only run at about the speed of these airships. So you can take her up to about 25-30 miles an hour, but that's about it. She won't go much faster than that. And she's dropping, as you can see, gradually dropping down on this invisible track to enter the hangar at Cardington, at St Twinels. I must admit, I do like the idea that St Twinels has an airship hangar, an airship base. Now as she approaches, as with any of these, she needs to start to lose a bit of her speed. So we'll take her down to about 5 miles an hour. And what I can't do is add in all the little figures running around with ropes and all the rest of it to help control her movement, if there's any wind or anything like that. And so it was a very skillful operation. And of course the pilot is down here. There we are, in the gondola underneath. So he's got to fly, but he's got to remember his nose, as it were, is up here. So he's got to be very careful. And there we are, although it's on a curve. I think it's alright. I hope I haven't put too sharp a curve on this. She should straighten up. Let's have a look. As she begins to enter. So you didn't want to do this on a windy day. But there she is. She's just about avoiding the doors, I think. I hope I've managed to do that. If not, then it's an object lesson on how to lay out the invisible track. No, she's just fine. I mean, you've got to admire the way in which these airships were manipulated. All of the interior, by the way, of the hangar, all of that complex interior, is modelled on the interior of the ones at Cardington, and that's why it's got a number of, there's quite a few. I just wanted to demonstrate that that isn't actually touching. There we are. And it's modelled on the hangars at Cardington. You can see through the windows there how far she's getting, and that's why I've had to use a number of actual models as dependencies. So the doors, the interior stanchions, and even the wheel sets which the doors run on, I had to do those as just taking the speed down a bit, down to 3 miles an hour now, and so she's being very gently nudged into position. Let me just watch that as the tail plane closes. She's down to 2 miles an hour, and now I can bring her to a stop. There we are. And so she's just hanging there in the hangar, and that's what this hangar is all for. So let's have a look at our other airship. Now all of this airship, and indeed the mooring mast, have been on my website for a number of years now. But now that it's got the hanger, I felt it was worth, as it were, highlighting them again. And so here we are in charge of Graf Zeppelin, and we'll give her some acceleration. You'll see the propellers starting to turn on the, I think there were 5 motors, and you'll see there it's a much more developed pilot's position, and of course it was a passenger carrier. She actually travelled across the Atlantic and ended her days disastrously, with there's much controversy about what caused it. But the last I remember seeing, now we don't want to go in too fast, so she's doing 20 at the moment, because we want her to tie up at that mooring mast, and remember it's a buffer. So I'm trying to take the speed down a bit, and this is what I like about these, is if you do undulate the invisible track, they do dip and rise in their path, and once you have the invisible track laid, either as for preference a loop, or going from the mooring mast or from the hanger out and back again, and you can just let them carry on. There we are, getting in closer, hear the sound. And it's rather that when you're running a train down on the ground and suddenly this enormous great airship comes powering overhead, and it just adds a lot of atmosphere, I think, to a route. So now she's getting quite close in, so I think we need to gently reduce some of the speed. Here she is, appearing at the bottom of the screen here, coming into that mooring mast. Remember, it's a buffers, so just like with any train, you don't want to approach it too fast, and the airships are always very cautious in approaching either mooring masts or hangars or wherever. And as I say, let's maybe give her a little more way, a little more speed, take her up a mile per hour. The controversy about the Graf Zeppelin is why she crashed and burned, and the latest, I seem to remember a few years back now, was that there was some electrical discharge, for some atmospheric electrical discharge, not quite a lightning strike, somewhere along the upper back behind the gondola, and the material which covers the skeleton of Graf Zeppelin, and indeed most airships, is a sort of doped canvas soaked in a liquid which made it retain gas. So I've just knocked her down to 2 miles an hour, and the getting ready to hit the stop button. And there we are. And there she is, tethered now to the mooring mast. So there we are, 2 airships, the mooring mast and the hangar. Yes, and that ignited the outer canvas covering, and then the gas is held in separate balloons, if you like, within the body of the airship. But of course, once the fire got going, and they're using hydrogen gas because helium was really in any quantity was only available in the United States, and the US government certainly didn't allow it to be exported in any quantity. And that was, of course, the fatal flaw for this type of early airship, relatively early airship. So I hope you've enjoyed that. So all of these items here are available to download as freeware from my website. Please leave any comment that you might like. Please give me a thumbs up, and if you haven't already done so, please subscribe.